hello. There you
Hello
are.
there. How are you today or tonight?
Good, thank you. Oh, how's that? I'm just sitting on my couch, so I don't know if I should go back a bit or something.
No, you're fine.
Maybe not.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine.
Ta-da! Right.
That's fine. That's super.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have the great good fortune to bring to you tonight Miss Alex Hills, who is an activist for human liberty, an activist for Freedom Press, I'm sure. And Alex, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I understand you're both a talented musician as well as a human rights activist. Tell us a little bit about who Alex Hills is.
Okay. I'm completely an accidental activist, I would call myself. Have been a musician for years and years, and I've attended protests and played for protests many times, but always sharing on the internet and sort of really just doing things from the background, not really taking a lead. But then about a year ago, I witnessed the violinist in London, Alex Taylor, getting thrown off the streets outside the London Embassy for playing Waltzing Matilda. It was Australia Day. He was Australian and he was in London, and just simply playing Waltzing Matilda had him thrown off the streets by the armed task force, I'll have you, which was ridiculous. And, of course, that got me thinking. He had managed to break into mainstream media, which is incredibly hard to do, especially with anything that's positive towards Assange. So I was incredibly inspired by that. I started to get a little bit more interested. I mean, I'd say that my activism started in the Bernie days, though. I was a major Bernie supporter. I was in pretty much every Facebook group. And even back in those days, I noticed, particularly in New Zealand, we were suffering from quite bad censorship and algorithms. I noticed it before my American counterparts did. And in fact, they used to say I was just being paranoid, but now I think they're all they all concur with me that that's actually what's going on. And perhaps New Zealand is a wonderful place to test out new censorship laws and all that sort of stuff surrounding the truth that was published about Hillary. Really, the fact that she was quite a war criminal herself, and that the choice between Trump and Hillary was just abominable. I mean, like Assange says, it's gonorrhea versus cholera, isn't it? And so I guess back in those days, that's what really enraged me, that we can safely say that there's not another media organisation that can compare with it in terms of delivering the truth. And so around about a year ago, I started asking around through the Internet Party in New Zealand and a few other minor groups that I knew here, TPP. I was asking if anyone was going to protest for the global June 19th, which was the 6th-year anniversary of his stay in the embassy last year. And literally, there were a lot of people in the background here doing work, but no one was willing to get out and be the face of Assange and WikiLeaks. And it really enraged me again. And I thought, well, someone's got to do it, even if it's just me with a sign. Well, this was my sign. So I thought I'll just turn up and I'll try and get as many people to come. And little did I know, I started to use the music and the violin, and sometimes the violin with the hula hoop and all sorts of crazy things to kind of get attention. And it seems to have gone wildfire. I mean, my Facebook, my Twitter, it's surprising. My YouTube, even to some extent, it was a surprising reaction. I never thought that I would be a good activist. So once I realized that I actually seem to have a talent for getting attention and making a fool out of myself, not being afraid to speak out and say what I feel is the truth here. And I know a lot of people are particular. I mean, I'm in Wellington. A lot of my friends are in Canberra. They're stuck in government jobs or they have government clients. It's incredibly hard to speak out. And I'm in a really, really privileged position where I have my own business. I'm an architect. So I'm able to work on my own, which has helped me being able to speak out, which I don't know if I'd be able to do otherwise. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Many of us have come through to the world of activism through unusual routes. Um, I started myself when I was in high school. I was a very much an appreciator of Native American culture,
Mm,
and I saw just even as a young person in school still, I saw a direct connection between the way Native Americans were treated and the way African Americans were treated.
right.
And it seemed to me beyond question, how could Dr. King's work not be understood for not just freeing and improving the situation for African Americans, but improving it for all Americans? We
Mm,
were all
mm,
going to benefit when people were treated better. So,
absolutely.
so that was the first thing that galvanized my own interest. And then, of course, the Vietnam War, which was easily to understand as a racist war for resources.
Mm.
And all the rah rah and the fake patriotism that was ginned up to get people involved, to get people to feel good about destroying a country to save it.
Yeah.
That seemed to me completely absurd. So I've been I've been in the fray for a long time, and I've been graced with the ability to write and the ability to do cartooning. So I've been cartooning for human rights against the wars for too darn long, anyway. Um,
Wonderful.
what you know, for people who, let's say, are on the fence or don't really understand the issues involved with Julian, why don't you talk about what's most important about the work of Julian Assange, the work of WikiLeaks?
Yep.
What service have they provided, not just America or Europe or Australia and New Zealand, but what do you understand is the work of WikiLeaks?
Well, I mean, it's wide and varied. I mean, I think pretty much any issue that you can be concerned about. I came originally, I'm a bit of a green architect. I've always taught and studied and tried to put forward green principles in architecture. And so environmental activism was absolutely fundamental for me. I'm being part of green parties over here and helping them as much as I can. And really, it came down to the fact that I realized that I cannot be an activist for environmental causes while governments are able to be lobbied, they're able to be legally bribed, there is no transparency, there is no power held to account by journalists. And more today, I mean, when I was a kid, when I was growing up, even on the TV news, you would have two sides of a story. You'd have two narratives, and you might have two experts arguing the case. This simply isn't the case anymore. We are
It's
not
sadly
there.
true.
We
Sadly
are in a
true.
post-truth world, and it's really depressing. And I'd say we're possibly, as Susie Dawson said today on Unity for J Vigil, we're in a post-law world at this stage. I mean, Britain is completely ignoring the laws here. They've had two UN rulings which have determined that Julian was arbitrarily detained, that he was illegally detained by UK, US, and Australia, doing nothing, by the way, about their own citizen, and that he needed to be freed and compensated immediately. And basically that's been completely ignored. On top of that, medical professionals have gone in a couple of years ago now and said that he needed urgent medical care. Now, as I understand it, he has been in Belmarsh now for 2 weeks and he has not received any medical care, although I still need that confirmed. But as far as I'm aware, it took a while for his lawyers to even be allowed to access, apart from the very first day. I mean, we literally have lost habeas corpus, we've lost privacy, and so if we carry on this way, we're allowing the war criminals to carry on persecuting because they're still in power. They're still sitting in Washington. I'm not just talking about Republicans. And this is the thing that I don't think Americans are all fully getting, is that it's not just Republicans, it is very much Democrats. And if anything, I can say that the last 2 years of Russiagate in American media has been a bit of a disgrace to people around the world looking on, because what we should be arguing about here is Trump's awful policies, his disgusting policies, not red baiting and trying to make war with Russia while criticizing Trump. And I've had a lot to say about Russiagate because I really feel that this has really been a big mistake. And the three reasons I feel that that's been perpetrated is because they had to hide the fact that democracy was broken in America. And I mean, as a New Zealand citizen, we are vassal states of the US and the UK. We have no choice about our foreign policy and wars and what we fund. We pay millions to the Clinton Foundation, millions. I mean, I think Australia was 88 million. New Zealand was something in the realm of about 15, 20 million. And I know those sounds like small amounts, but when we're talking about Saudi Arabia paying Hillary 150 million, I mean, weapons deals, God knows what, I think it's a bit ridiculous. And so we don't have a vote here. So I get very noisy about American politics, and I don't really say much about New Zealand politics or Australian politics because really we are powerless to do anything. It feels quite futile. So this is why I direct my attack at where I feel that we need to try and make improvements. And yeah, I mean, there's an awful lot to say about how important WikiLeaks is. For instance, from my environmental perspective, not many people know that Chelsea Manning, her leaks could have actually stopped the BP Mobile Exxon disaster happening. Not many people realise that. Now, if journalists had done their job and if it wasn't such a taboo to publish WikiLeaks materials and actually work with them. I mean, like everyone's done it. New York Times, Washington Post, everyone's published WikiLeaks data. But if it wasn't such a problem, perhaps those leaks that Chelsea Manning had come out with would have been looked at and we would have been able to avoid that horrific disaster. So it isn't really just about corruption or just about, America's democracy. It's about the whole world's ability to react to issues. And we're very much missing the point. Yeah.
It is obvious to many of us progressives here, obviously not all, but many, that one of the things that's been lost in the wash, the Trump policies are horrendous across the board. He has brought the foxes in to guard the chicken coops again and again and again.
Gina.
And one of the things that I agree with you 100% on, especially, has been sort of lost in the mix, is yes, there's a degree of outrage about let's say the Clinton hack, however that material surfaced. But one of the things that's really not been discussed much is some of the information contained in that. And yes, the people who supported progressive issues, supported Bernie, supported the Green Party here, yes, there was a degree of outrage, but a lot of that information really never got discussed because the focus was more on the loss to Bernie, the theft of Bernie. And Americans, by and large, still believe the myth that we are a government of the people and do not understand the power of the international oligarchs. And I think you make that point very well, that you as New Zealanders really are a vassal state, aptly put indeed. And I do want, if we have time for you to explore a little bit, you mentioned the censorship there in New Zealand. And many Americans have so little geographical knowledge, so little geopolitical knowledge, that I'd like you to help us understand that a little bit better because we know the censorship issues here. We know what Snowden has told us. We know what Kiriakou has told us. And these are critical issues. And you're right, we do suffer under an international oligarch group. But let's stay with Julian just for a little bit longer. The work of Chelsea Manning, the work of Julian Assange to get these messages out has been so important. And they have revealed so much, as Daniel Ellsberg has said, very much comparable to the Pentagon Papers in their revelations. Let me ask you, what are your hopes for Julian in this next period? Do you think he's going to be taken from Britain to America to stand trial?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that these charges that we're hearing about now are just the tip of the iceberg. And in fact, Obama, we know, wouldn't have prosecuted because he knew of the danger to journalism, the danger to free press. I mean, imagine if this precedent is allowed to carry on. Can you imagine if Saudi Arabia says, oh, I'm going to take a foreign journalist, because Assange is from Australia, I'm going to ask for this foreign journalist to be extradited. I won't expect any problem with it. And I will bring him here and make him subject to my laws because I don't like what he published about my evil regime. We can imagine the scenario, and this is exactly what America's doing. And do they realize this is what they're doing? And I know a lot of Trump voters who are still holding on. I've heard figures like 20% of Trump's voters have dropped him over Assange at the moment, it seems like, which is wonderful news. I'm delighted, as long as there's a good candidate in the Democrats to work with, but we'll come to that later. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, basically the judge that ruled in UK for his magistrate's hearing, in a very brief hearing, where the open hearing, he was called a narcissist by the very judge supposedly being non-biased. I mean, I think that would have turned it out of court almost immediately if we were able to appeal, if there was any kind of normality here, but there isn't, because basically the war criminals are still in power in Britain and in Australia and in America.
Yeah.
And in the media organizations, in the head of every single media organization, there is another war criminal. I'm sorry, but that is where we are. And they have all been exposed by Assange and Manning and all the other WikiLeaks releases, which have never ever turned out to be anything but truth. So they are embarrassed. They cannot have him walk free because he is actually one of the human beings who's read the most classified documents in existence. So you can imagine the sensitive things that he hasn't published because he didn't want to risk anyone's lives, and in fact, the Pentagon confirmed that no one's life has been harmed by WikiLeaks releases. I better put that out there because that's a common smear of Assange. Yeah, I mean, this whole thing of blaming Assange for Hillary, which I really feel this has come down to, it is a joke because what we're blaming him for is revealing the truth about Hillary. And I'm still actually
an ironic position, that's for sure.
It's crazy. And I think if they actually just stepped out of themselves for a minute and looked in, they'd just see how crazy it was.
One of the things that worries me is that should he come to this country for a trial, I'm afraid they're going to seal the court. They won't allow him to speak. And because, as you said, he has so much more to tell. And while there is a criticism here, even on the left, and it's a shame, because, as you said, nothing has been proven that WikiLeaks has published as false. That he's basically accused of carrying water for Trump, or siding with the enemies of Clinton and therefore America, and has helped us get Trump. I think that's not a positive thing, and it fails to comprehend what was trying to be said about Hillary, what was trying to say about the Clinton people, that the corruption was tremendous, that the war making, the exploitation was tremendous, and that's a tough thing to say. But I think those of us who support Mr. Assange, support the work of WikiLeaks, support the work of whistleblowers, and whistleblowers are still, while there's lip service paid to protecting them, in practical fact, they're not protected at all.
No.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the censorship issues, because we have them here, largely speaking, limited by dollars. That if the story doesn't make money for the sponsors, they're just not going to cover it. We've basically lost an international news component for our news. It's just not covered, except in the progressive press. That's why I'm talking to you. Can you talk a little bit about the censorship that you faced in New Zealand?
Yeah. Well, I had some interesting things happen during the Bernie. It was just great to see Americans embracing even something slightly left of centre. For us in the rest of the world, I don't think most people realise, but the Democrats are pretty much right-wing for us. So, just to see that happening and everyone getting so excited, and then to see it slowly degrade down and everyone getting really distraught by the cheating, and some of the cheating I saw was extraordinary, and it hasn't been covered on any mainstream news that I can see. Some of the things that happened at the convention even, really, really shocking. But anyway, so it was around about that time when I was posting. I had probably 1,000 followers, not that many, but a lot of them were real friends. And what I noticed was anything kitten, anything that without any keywords in it, anything sort of a banal status update, I would have 50 or 60 likes quite easily, or, at least 30 if it was a boring one. I would have a little bit of exposure. And if I posted the slightest political thing, zero. Literally zero. For a while, it took them a little while to sort the algorithm out. So it was really blatantly obvious for me. And I got really, really angry. I started telling people they thought I was being paranoid. But I believe that because New Zealand is quite, happy to not complain. I mean, British complain. I'm half British, half. God, I'm actually triple citizenship. So Australian, Kiwi, and British. I've got 3 passports. So British people complain. We're really good at it. And so I was just outraged, and no one believed me. A little bit later on, I wrote a post that said, vote for Hillary so that she can profit from Genie Energy in Syria. And, it was a completely sarcastic post. And it got pinned to the top of my Facebook profile for about 3 months during the election season.
I'm sure that was a coincidence.
My personal page. I had no knowledge of how you would even pin a post to the top of your personal page. Yet everyone was seeing it because it said, vote for Hillary, so. And I guess the algorithm didn't get the sarcasm, nor the Syria references or any of that stuff. And so, yeah, and it just really revealed it to me. But yeah, so now the censorship is quite rife, particularly after Christchurch. Now, I happen to believe that the whole distrust of the media is causing these factions, these hate groups, this nastiness to brew, this hopelessness, because people have lost hope in media, in government. There isn't that rock anymore to hold on to. And so people are flagging about. Now, this Christchurch terrorist, whoever he was from Australia, apparently, if he had been a WikiLeaks activist, he would have been on the radar. He would have been watched 24/7. We know that. And yet, what is WikiLeaks activists saying? Nothing really that bad, just a little bit anti-government perhaps, but not really anything illegal, nothing hate, nothing. You can't possibly say that what I'm saying is hate. I mean, of course, I've been called a Trump supporter and all sorts of things for supporting Assange, but I try to defend my position. But it's quite tough because people are paralyzed by this sort of partisan feeling. So now after Christchurch, what's really interesting, now I'm pretty happy about changes in gun laws so that we can't have automatic rifles, as long as, there are hunters here who go out in the bush, and as long as they can enjoy a free hunting and we don't expect to have every citizen armed to the hilt, that's great. I'm really proud of Jacinda for doing that, and I'm really proud of the way she handled herself. But huge but was that they immediately censored 4chan and 8chan. Now, those are places where people go when anti-war activists have been thrown off Facebook and they've been thrown off Twitter and they can't operate anymore. And so they tend to go to 4chan and 8chan because that's somewhere where they can still operate. Now, you've just pushed everything into the dark web by getting rid of that because there's nowhere to go, and you're pushing it all into under the carpet and thinking it's not going to be a problem, but of course it is. So I'm very objective I'm objecting very much to the censorship, but not so much to the gun laws. I actually have sympathy for, is it the Second Amendment in America?
Yeah.
I have sympathy for people at the moment because I can see that they've got a government that they think can rise up against them at any point. They're on the defensive, and I feel that that's why people are so, I mean, apart from the NRA and all the corrupt lobbyists and all that rubbish, but, I feel that's why people defend the Second Amendment in America, and I have a lot of time to listen to them, even though I'm anti-gun as such, Anyway, there's a whole lot of that, but I will say that New Zealand certainly seems to be the test bed of any kind of censorship, and if I get wind of any other stuff coming along the windpipe, I will tell you. I'll definitely come and tell you. But
I would like you to just in the spirit of artist to artist, when you get a chance, please send me some of your MP3s so that we can enjoy some of the music that is also Alex Hills.
Yeah.
And I think some of the best artists are ones that take the heart that they feel for the world, the love that they feel for humanity in their art, and it works in their politics as well. So I really salute you for that.
Thank you.
As we wrap up our little interview today, let me ask you, you've mentioned to me offline that there has been that, as you say, that it's a little timid. People are a little concerned about coming out supporting Julian. Is there a support Julian movement in New Zealand, in Australia? What's going on? What are they trying to do? Have they spoken to the government? What kind of reaction are they getting?
We're all over the world, and we're all in different groups. And one big one, maybe a couple of big ones actually. It depends what platform you're on. The largest one and the most successful one is a non-partisan group called Unity4J, and that is run by the likes of Joe Lauria from Consortium News at the moment. Before that, and also Elizabeth Lee Voss, who was Disobedient Media, and Susie Dawson, who is Internet Party New Zealand leader, who had to actually escape to Russia. So that shows you also what New Zealand isn't as perfect as everyone feels that it might be. But there are an awful lot of groups around the world. I mean, there are a whole swathe of Facebook groups called Actions for Assange with the country name or the city name. There are WikiLeaks Coalition, and there's Pray for Assange, there's Mothers for Assange, basically there's endless groups out there. The one that really brings everyone together, and I believe is the most functional to get you started, and then you might find your little country group and then start working with them and check into the global group every now and then, is the Unity4J. So it's UNITY 4 and then J, number 4 and then letter J. Well, what else is there? There are a whole bunch of groups out there. Musically, what you were talking about, I can definitely give you a couple of tracks of what I've been doing. The London violinist, who I did meet on Twitter, I actually messaged him and said, "Oh, you've inspired me to start protesting using my violin." He sent me a song, and I released it at Christmas time, and it's called "Let the Light In." That's a Unity4J song.
Nice.
And that did incredibly well. So it's like a New Zealand, a London Assange violin duet. And it's also got the most beautiful singer, and then Kathy Vaughan, who's an Australian WikiLeaks long-time supporter. She made it into a much more professional version of my video. Before that, my mate, Timothy, my mate in Free Assange NZ, which is my particular group in New Zealand that focuses on actions on the ground here, he and I came up with a Julian Assange song, sort of little reggae number, so very different from the Christmas number. I think people really loved that one. We didn't really mean to issue it. I actually just put it out there because people were having a bit of a grumpy day in the activism world. And my colleague didn't want to be in the picture because she wasn't comfortable. So I asked her to drum, and we got a big stuffed toy lion Ian, can you bring me the lion? We a stuffed toy lion, and the lion drummed in the video, and it was literally the second time we'd ever played the song. It was a jam, and it was still kind of being worked out as we played it. And I thought, oh, that video is so much fun with a puppet playing the drums. I'm just going to put it out there anyway and just see what people like. And everyone retweeted it. It's like WikiLeaks retweeted it, and Julian Assange's account tweeted it, even though he didn't have internet access. But, you know, it went completely crazy, and it was really funny because it was such a jam, and I was a little bit embarrassed. But now we've mastered it, and we did it again at the Wellington protest last week. And you can find that pinned to my Twitter, which is Greenweaver Arch. So GreenweaverArch. It's embarrassing because it's my work. It's my work Twitter, Greenweaver Architecture. So
well, thank
anyway,
you so very much.
Sorry.
Well, it's been wonderful talking to you. It's good to hear the voice of the good people of New Zealand standing up for press freedom, standing up for the truth. Thank you so very much, Alex, for joining me. And we'll publish this on YouTube as well as on the show. So bravo to you, and I look forward to hearing some of your tunes, okay?
Wonderful. I'll share it widely.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
And freedom to express, freedoms of speech. Do they apply to WikiLeaks? Now they want him to expose them enemies of their state. Now they want him to expose them because of Russiagate. He exposed them, disrobed them, Julian Assange.
Well done. Well done.